First, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate the invitation to speak to you all today. I am a certified professional soil scientist, viticulturalist, crop advisor. But I'm also a grape grower. So some of the technologies that I get involved with have to do with me trying to answer questions that I run into as a grower, and I find things that I think that are meaningful, and I take them out into the general growing public. Um, what a difference a year makes. At 2022 last year, I was telling a lot of people, based upon the soil moisture, that we should be pre-irrigating. And we did. We put a lot of water on. Now 2023 is a different story. We've had so much rain that our soil profiles, at least most everywhere we've been checking, are full. So that need for pre-irrigation isn't here this year. And that's just a difference from year to year, coming from a drought into a heavy rain year. And that's one of your first decisions in your irrigation cycle is, do I need to pre-irrigate? And soil moisture will answer that question for you. So, where a lot of people are talking about, will I ever need to irrigate in 2023? No matter how much it rains in any year, our soils will only hold so much water, and that's called available water holding capacity. Most vineyard soils can't hold enough water to meet the crop and yield demands for an entire year. And you can grow what they call dry farmed vineyards. They work, it happens, but you have to have a very high available water holding capacity site to get sufficient growth and yield. Adding irrigation water at the right time allows us to carry more crop and ripen it. So most of us will need to irrigate at some point. So and this here is kind of a review of things that I'm just not going to delve into too much. But when do we begin irrigating? How much do we irrigate? Well, typically people use plant triggers. It's the leaf water potential, stress index, the growing tips, something like that, where there's an indication in the plant itself that says, okay, growth is slowing down, or the leaf water potential is going up, so I need to start applying water. Others will look at soil moisture. It's another way to do it. I don't particularly like soil moisture as a trigger for beginning irrigation, simply because the root systems are so extensive. It's hard to measure the entire root system to get a real good feel for when do you start. But my message here is you should have a trigger point, and the trigger point shouldn't be how hot is it outside. If the plants are growing vigorously and you're not either at your trigger point or very near your trigger point, even though it's hot and you have sufficient moisture in your soil, you probably don't need to irrigate. Vineyard's going to be fine. You can wait until you get near the trigger points, and then you begin. How much is, looking at soil moisture, looking at evapotranspiration. Again, I'm going to touch on that, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. What I really want to delve into is how much water is needed to meet plant demand during these high heat events, because this is something that we're running into that's new, that we're getting these high heat events during the growing season, and we're trying to figure out how much water to put on. So they're becoming more prevalent, and both fruit quality and quantity can be impacted by excessive canopy and fruit temperatures. And so what can we do to help mitigate that? Now, we've been measuring canopy temperatures and fruit temperatures can help you identify or kind of guide irrigation decisions. And we've been doing that for quite a while now, and I'm going to touch on some of the things that we're doing and some of the data and what we've learned from it. This is my first canopy temperature tool. It is basically, I was out there feeling canopies, feeling the leaves, feeling the shade leaves, feeling the sun leaves. I could tell, and this is one of my running jokes, was I could guess your pressure bomb readings or your leaf water potential for cash and prizes by feeling the leaves and looking at the tips. So canopy temperatures and looking at them have been around a long while. And when I first started doing it, it was pretty primitive, but it worked. We moved on to using IR guns, and they were very helpful as well. But But what we learned over the years is the leaf temperatures vary in the canopy, and collecting data in multiple areas is very difficult to do, because you can't be everywhere at one time with an IR gun or anything else. So, and also determining what the response time was. I put on this much water, or how much in advance of the heat do I need to put it on? All those questions we really couldn't answer. It was kind of forensic. We go out and do some measurements before and after, but never really had something go through a heat event. So, real-time canopy temperatures. That's the tool we're using now. It allows us to collect real-time leaf temperatures everywhere during the heat spikes, wherever these devices are deployed. And it also allows us to look at, during the heat event, how hot did things get? Did we put enough water on, and did we put it on far enough in advance? Typically this is, I think you can see my cursor. There's a little data logger here, and we've got sensors through this canopy. So what we're measuring, what we're really after here, is when you've got this high water vapor content inside the leaf. Can you see my cursor, Megan?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Okay, and you've got water vapor coming from this high water vapor content out to the atmosphere. And as the leaves lose this water, they cool themselves. So it's evaporative cooling. Another thing we've learned is that this air boundary layer, the temperature of this air boundary layer is very important. It's for the vines to regulate their temperatures. Okay, this is Dr. Kennedy's slide here. So here's flowering, and this is cell division. If you're irrigating during cell division in between flowering and veraison, if you're irrigating then, you're going to have more cell division, you're going to have more cells. And that's going to affect quality. If you're trying to get the largest berries you can get, then applying water during this period of time is the thing to do. However, most red varietals, we're holding the water off during this period of time, during cell division, and trying to restrict the number of cells. Then once we get past lag phase and we get into past veraison and into color and ripening, then we're a little more free to continue irrigating without over irrigating, because we need to keep these processes happening. Sugars, color, and flavor are all being developed here. So in most red varietals, you're restricting here to keep the cell division down, and then we're taking care of our canopy and making sure that the ripening process is moving forward. Okay, this is Dr. Forcell's work. She did some work that in the Lodi area, up in the hills there, and she was looking at leaf temperatures and the physiological responses of grapevines. This 40 degrees centigrade is about 104. I think she got up to about 47. I think it's about 116. These were the actual canopy temperatures in different irrigation regimes. But you see there's quite a scatter here. These are all point measurements, but as it got hotter, photosynthesis went down. As it got hotter, stomatoconductance went up, and we got more stress. So what did that do? This was a part of her presentation that really I thought was brilliant. No one had done this type of work, and this is helpful. This was what they called heat event 2, and I believe that the air temperature got to about 109 there, and these are the heavily watered. The purple and the blue are heavily watered, and the yellow one is a 60% ET, wasn't irrigated as much. And as they went through that heat event, the total flavanols dropped out of the not so well watered group and stayed much higher where they applied more water. Now, that's one of the first measurements I've seen that directly looked at temperatures and grape quality. Here's another slide from 2019. Same effect. We have anthocyanins, we have color. Here's heat event 2, and the lower irrigation amount dropped out and never recovered a bit, but never quite recovered. So it had lower color. So this slide here, so the idea of cooling your vineyard with irrigation can be done in a number of ways. And we're looking at trying to cool it by irrigating it. So on this graph, this is a complicated graph. I'm just going to briefly touch on what to look at here. This scale is called a delta. If this is 0, if it goes above it, it's hotter than the ambient air temperature. If it goes below it, it's cooler. So this blue line here, you can see that the grape leaves are cooling themselves. The red line here shows that they are not, that the stomates have closed and the leaves are hotter than ambient. So we have some leaves, if this scale here is the ambient temperature, this is 90 degrees. I'm going to guesstimate that is maybe 94 degrees. So there's some leaves in this canopy that are at 94 plus 7, so you figure 101, and some other ones that are maybe 7 degrees cooler. And what I really want to bring out here, here's when we applied the water, and then the next day, in the middle of the day, the red line dropped down below, and then it's showing that now it has gone from 7 degrees warmer than ambient down to 7 degrees cooler than ambient. So we had a 14-degree change in canopy temperature through irrigation. So, and when you look at this here, when we had a heat event 2, 110, you would have some leaves that were 117 and other leaves that were 103. So when you look, in order to really evaluate what a heat event does to your fruit quality, you really got to know what your canopy is doing, because your canopy can be significantly cooler or hotter than the ambient air temperatures. Okay, the other aspect is VPD, which is vapor pressure deficit, and that's the difference between the moisture in the air and the total amount that it can hold. And just quite simply, as VPD increases, goes higher, the amount of air and water in the air goes down. And a plant needs to draw more water from the soil to maintain their canopy as VPD increases. So VPD looks at both temperature and humidity. So if you've got 30 to 40% humidity and it's 105, and another day you've got 15% humidity and 105, the effect on the vine is different. Those vines need to pull a lot more water with that low VPD and with the high VPD number in order to maintain their canopies. So we've got to look at a couple of different things. Temperature and humidity, and VPD allows us to look into the humidity part. Okay, here's some examples. We're going to look at some data. This is soil resistivity. It just shows you where soils change. I'm a soil scientist, so this is where the gravels were in this particular vineyard. These are some clayier spots, and this is loam. We looked at a number of soil moisture data and leaf temperature data in a number of areas here based upon the soil types and the varietals. This is the one here, this first one here in this kind of bluey yellow there. This is all basically loam and gravelly loam, maybe 10-15% gravel, so a higher water holding capacity site. We also collected other data, shoot lengths and soil moisture and all kinds of things. So we collected quite a bit of data at these sites. This was the leaf temperature data, and this is going into July. When your leaf temperatures get above this yellow line somewhere around 94, then you start moving into moderate water stress. As you go over 104 or 105, then you're leaning into the higher pressure bomb readings. You're leaning into higher water stress. As you go above 110, then you impact fruit quality just by temperature alone. So this is basically July, and then we had a little spike here. They put on sufficient water. I'll show you that slide now. Here they actually put on 6 gallons, and it was sufficient to hold it down below. During this event, they put on 10 gallons and they spiked. So whatever they did during that heat event wasn't enough to hold the temperatures down to an acceptable level. I'll zoom in on this. You can see we had 3 days pretty much that we spiked temperatures. This is 120. So I'm looking at that thinking that was probably a canopy temperature of about 117, maybe 116 here. And based on that research and based on the feedback we're getting, that is high enough to impact fruit quality. So the lesson there was, given this Cabernet Sauvignon on 5C with this deeper loamy soil, 10 gallons wasn't enough. They're gonna need to apply more than that. Well, in that same vineyard, we measured the gravels here. We knew the gravelly, rocky stuff. Here it is. It's gravelly, coarse sandy loam, very gravelly, coarse sandy loam, very gravelly, coarse sandy loam with 20% cobble. So this is just a rock pile. We've got a different rootstock here. We've got 110Rs instead of 5C. It's a deeper rooting, more drought tolerant rootstock. This is what they did during that first heat spike there. You can see we had a couple of other ones earlier on that weren't present in the deep loam, where they just touched above the higher threshold. Even with 20 gallon application, they went a little bit over 20 gallon application here and still weren't able to hold that canopy below that threshold. I'll zoom in here. You can see we put on a lot more water there. We didn't quite get the 118, 17s, but for 5 days in a row, we had those things, and particularly these three where they're over 110, and this fourth one here, we had temperatures in that canopy that were not good for fruit quality. So in this example, 20 gallons isn't enough. So we're able to look at this, see what you apply, when you apply it, and whether you're able to hold those canopies down in a zone where you will not impact fruit quality. Now, here's another one, 110R, rocky soils. We had a spike here early. They pushed water. In this example, they were able to do it. We were able to put on enough water through the drip system, and that during that, I should have pointed that out. It was that heat event, the 5th, 6th, and 7th of September. We were able to hold the leaf temperatures down just through applying water through the drip system. So one of the more difficult water management questions we have now is, how do we manage these heat spikes? And so looking into this data, it at least gives me some hope that we can just use drip irrigated water to do that. So conclusions. Okay, water application should be directed by soil type, available water holding capacity, whenever possible. You can see that if we tried to run 20 gallons across that entire vineyard, we'd have been wasting a lot of water. They were able to channel the 20 gallon applications into one specific zone without having to push it all the way across the vineyard. So knowing your soils and having your rootstocks in the right soils and being able to push more water to those areas that need it while pushing less to others is going to stretch your water application. It's going to stretch your water resources, help you manage them better. The other thing is don't apply water unless the vineyard is at or near the trigger point. Again, it's going to be hot outside and you need to irrigate. If you're in full bloom and you think you're coming under water stress, I tell you to irrigate the thing, because you don't need to be under water stress at bloom, because they will shatter. But if you've got a vigorous growing vineyard, the crop is set, and it's going to be a pretty hot day, but your soil moisture is there and the vineyard is growing just fine, you probably don't need to irrigate that. You can save your water resources for a time when you do. Both temperature and VPD are important. A real critical threshold for higher water stress and those real high temperatures is when the humidity gets below 20 to 15. If it gets below 15, that's quite an event. But as it starts to get below 20, the VPD really skyrockets, and you need to be aware of that. And again, we can apply enough water to the drip system to cool the vineyards during some high heat events. And I believe the temperature in that one, we had an ambient temperature of 118 and 119. So that was in one example at 118, they weren't able to cool it. The other example, it was 119 at that particular vineyard. They put on enough water to successfully cool it. So other considerations. This is the other things we're looking at. Shade cloth. We're measuring that. We're looking at the effect of shade cloth on the fruit and also the leaves. And my advice to first of all, shade cloth is expensive. It's expensive to buy. It's expensive to put up, and you got to take it down. And it costs a lot of money it's an expensive mitigation. I would suggest that you'd use trellis and grow enough leaves and not overly leaf to where you need shade cloth. But if it's getting so hot that even your leaves are overheating and you don't have the water resources to cool them, you could use shade cloth to shade the fruit and the leaves, because we've done those measurements where they've just shaded the fruit, but our canopy still got too hot. So that would have to extend from the top of your trellis down to the cordon or to cover the fruit in order to shade both the fruit and the canopy. These little misters or foggers, we're looking at that. I'm hoping to be able to install a few systems in some vineyards that have those to see, number one, when we should turn them on, what the effect is on the leaf temperatures and just how effective they are. I think they'll be effective, but I haven't measured that yet. Variety and rootstock impacts. Most of what we're working on now is Cabernet. We have some Zinfandel and Merlot and a few other varietals, but we're hoping to expand our work to more different varietals here in the near future. So we're going to be looking at variety and rootstock and water holding capacity, and just get a good feel for how much water you would need to apply under those situations to give you a ballpark number to start with and to be able to cool them. Okay, last one is vineyard design. I put this last because I'm focusing more on what are we going to do with the vineyards we have. Now, vineyard design, the height of the cordon or the height of the canes may come into play if these heat spikes get more prevalent, or if the heat gets higher. The higher the cordon is from the soil surface, the less likely you're gonna encounter problems with reflectance. Reflectance off of a dark soil or a red soil up into the canopy is a significant problem, and that can cause your fruit to overheat. As you lift them up and get them higher off the ground, there is a significant drop in temperature to where you could lessen the effect. The other thing to consider is soil cover. You're going to go and mow under the vines, or you're going to mow your cover crop and scatter the brown straw or the kind of yellowish brown straw across the soil surface versus something that's disc. The bare soil will reflect more heat up than the mowed cover crop. So there's some things with vineyard design, row directions and cordon height and how we manage the vineyard floor that we're looking into and we're making measurements on, and we're learning more as we go. So I think that's all I had for today. Yes, that's all I've got. I think I moved through that pretty quickly, but hopefully I gave you some good information.